Hey guys, it's Lady and welcome back to this series of videos where I break down everything about our favorite Genshin characters. From stories unlocked via raising companionship levels, to voice lines said by other characters, to appearances in event quests, and so on. In other words, whether you don't have a specific character, can't be bothered to raise their companionship levels, need a refresher, or just want the basic TLDR of a character's text, then this ultimate lore guide is for you. Now, thanks to his rerun in patch 2.4, this video will focus on the stalwart defender of Liyue's peace, the vigilant Yaksha, Xiao. So let's begin by going over the lore from his character stories that are unlocked via companionship leveling. I just think this info will provide better context to Xiao's actions during his appearances in the actual game, as limited as he prefers them to be. And so, speaking of such brief appearances, this ties closely into what's probably the most notable thing about Xiao, in that he has been the stalwart protector of all of Liyue's people for centuries upon centuries. Yet few in the mortal realm even know of his existence. This is inevitable though, since he's not a deity nor a adepti who people pray to for prosperity, wealth, or divine wisdom. In other words, because this conqueror of demons can't bestow such things that could improve a person's lot in life, mortals have had little reason to recall him among the other adepti over the many years. This is also heightened by the fact that Xiao wages an invisible war, one that no one will witness nor thank him for, since that which he fights against are the unseen grudges that were left behind by the vanquished gods of old. You see, the unfulfilled dreams of these gods met their end millennia ago during the Archon War, mostly at the hands of MORAX, who then buried their defeated remains beneath the rocks of the earth. But while the consciousness of these gods may diminish, their power and hatred, fueled by the lamentations of their defeat, will always remain, because gods are immortal. Their remnants seep like poison into the world, stirring up chaos for the mortal realm, which can include anything from hateful demons to vicious monsters. And so, Xiao is one of the most stalwart protectors of Liyue's peace, though only the most high-ranking of Liyue's rulers seem to know of his sacrifice. They refer to him and his millennia-long experience as the bane of all evil, a title that's reflected in his elemental burst. When Xiao unleashes his full might, he dons a Yaksha mask that's based on the real-life ones worn in Nuo Opera. See, back when MORAX first called upon the Yakshas to disperse evil left behind from the Archon War, there were a great number of them who answered the call and took part in this endless battle. They generally held the most martial prowess of all the adepti, and were known to spare no amount of brutality in upholding their contract to protect Liyue. And of all the Yakshas, Xiao was and is still greatly respected by his fellow adepti as one of the 5 foremost members. He, in particular, they refer to as the conqueror of demons. But as for mortals, like we've discussed earlier, few know of his sacrifice, and in fact, if one were to witness Xiao unleash his full power, it'd be only under the most direst of circumstances, where they'd most likely end up as collateral damage. There's actually a story relating to this and a certain Cryo 5-star that I'll bring up later in this video, but back to the Yaksha's sacrifice. This isn't only measured in Xiao's willingness to risk his life in battle, but also by the sheer weight of karmic debt he's willing to take on. You see, the only possible way of eradicating the never-ending hatred of fallen gods is by accepting the same magnitude of karmic debt upon oneself. Its dangerous depths more than any mortal could possibly fathom. Xiao's relentless slaughtering of these evil manifestations has caused his spirit to become tainted, to the point where it normally consumes flesh, bone, and even one's very soul. The sheer amount of this karma has caused great suffering to all the yakshas, and so while many of them, like Pervases, eventually fell in battle, others tragically succumbed to their heavy karmic debt, falling into madness and even turning on and slaying each other. Now fast forwarding to present day, and Xiao is the only yaksha who remains in the mortal realm. But despite all the physical agony this causes him, Xiao himself feels no hatred. Because you see, it's not really the wrath of vanquished gods that he wrestles with most, but rather himself and his own past. You see, ages before MORAX even summoned the first yakshas, back during a time when Xiao was younger and much more naive, a cruel god discovered and took hold of his weakness, leaving him with no choice but to do the evil god's bidding. He was forced to commit an innumerable amount of cruel and violent acts, which resulted in the deaths and crushed hopes of so many. The god who enslaved him even forced Xiao to devour his victims' dreams, which, by the way, is actually the reason why almond tofu is the only mortal food he enjoys. Not because of the flavor, though, but because of its irresistible texture that reminds him of those very dreams he used to devour. But back to the story of his past. On one fateful day, MORAX challenged Xiao's master and ended up defeating him on the battlefield. Then, having compassion on the now freed Adeptus, he bestowed him the name Xiao. And yep, you heard that right. Xiao is not the yaksha's real name. It's actually Alatus. But MORAX gave him the new name based on an old fable about a spirit named Xiao who also encountered great suffering and hardship. And thus, Xiao, the vigilant yaksha, remains entirely loyal to the Geo Archon and the contract he took on to defend Liyue, as thanks for all that was done for him. However, the time Xiao spent enslaved to that cruel god has cost him his prior innocence and gentleness. Now the only thing that remains is his means to kill, and the weight of his sins. Believing all he can offer mortals is his service in battle, Xiao defends Liyue with no qualms. But that begs the question, who will defend Xiao? The Liyue Qiqi at the very least has tasked certain special agents with supporting Xiao, albeit under the guise of an ordinary inn. So yeah, it explains why the entire staff of Longshu Inn does their best to lessen Xiao's suffering and the weight of his responsibilities. Though at the end of the day, there just seems to be something special about the Archons when it comes to saving Xiao when he needs it most, whether intentional or not. We already discussed Zhongli's rule so many millennia ago, so the instance that follows is one that occurred much more recently. One night, after fighting from dusk till dawn, Xiao emerged from battle by just a mere hair. Utterly exhausted, he would have succumbed to his karmic debt that night if it weren't for the clear sound of a flute, which carried over the mountains to where he lay in agony. Its melody gave the yaksha a moment of peace and protected him until morning rose. Xiao to this day has never pursued the question of who saved him that night, but it's easy enough for him to guess, considering the last person who could truly help him was one of the seven. But now with his background covered, I think it's a good time to move on to Xiao's appearances in the actual game, starting with his role in the Liyue Archon quests. So Act 1 begins when the Traveler is essentially framed for the assassination of Rex Lapis, so in order to clear our name, we must seek out an audience with the Adepti of Drayun Karst. Acknowledging our sigil of permission, Mountain Shaper tells us of 3 other Adepti who must be informed about this dire news, one of whom is Xiao, the conqueror of demons, who can often be found at Wangshu Inn. Right as we step onto the upper balcony to enjoy the view, a young man just suddenly appears next to us, taking note of our sigil of permission. He rather nonchalantly mentions that while it prevents him from hurting us by his own hands, it doesn't mean he's forced to protect us from getting hurt in other ways or anything, baka. We're told that at the end of the day, too much contact with the Adepti is not good for us mortals, since our kind is normally unable to withstand such adeptal energy. In other words, it'd be in our best interest to leave immediately. Then with that, he vanishes once more before we can even get one word in. We ask the boss of the inn, Vergolde, if she has any tips on how to approach Xiao, and she mentions that one of the few human foods he likes is almond tofu. She points us to the inn chef, Smiley Yan Xiao, and long story short, before Smiley can get to our order, we first have to help out this ghost girl who keeps hanging around the kitchen. Turns out she goes by Dusky Ming, and once we figure out how to help her, Wangshu's chef finally feels safe to enter the kitchen again. He gets to work on the almond tofu right away as thanks for our help. Then once that's ready, we return to the balcony and take Xiao by surprise when we hand over his favorite. This time we quickly explain the entire situation regarding Rex Lapis before he finishes eating and leaves again. Xiao's obviously pretty shocked since he never imagined a Liyue without Rex Lapis, and now plans to meet with the Qiqi and the other Adepti, ultimately to figure out what the former's role is in all of this. Also on another note, it turns out that Dusky Ming was a spirit Xiao encountered during his demon slaying. He occasionally comes across these spirits who have never brought harm to anyone, but are also unable to move on, so he was the one who asked the innkeepers if they could watch over her for a while. I'll bring up a few more NPC examples like this that showcase how Xiao obviously cares more about people than he lets on, but that won't be until later in the video, so stay tuned. Anyway, we don't meet him again until the finale of the Archon quest. Atop the Jade Chamber, he and the rest of the Adepti have agreed to put all mistrust of the Qiqi aside for now, due to the dangerous threat that Child summoned to wreak havoc on Liyue Harbor. The Harbinger's fellow Fatui appear and try to bring down the Guizhong ballistas, which are our main source of damage to Osile. Now, Xiao is one of the 3 Adepti, alongside Madame Ping and Ganyu, who lend us some of their power to fight off these hordes. Apparently, his name means swiftness, and so we are gifted with increased movement speed for a while thanks to Xiao. Unfortunately, Osile is eventually able to destroy the platform, which sends all of us plummeting to the ground, though thankfully Xiao zips over in midair and saves the traveler from becoming a pancake. Then he, along with the rest of the Adepti, the Qiqi, and the traveler channel their energy into the Jade Chamber in order to send it hurtling into Osile, successfully saving Liyue from the god's rage. But in the bright aftermath of their victory, of course it has to be the conqueror of demons who must turn down a small girl's invite to the next Lantern Rite festival. The reality is, he and the other Adepti are meant to be apart from the mortal realm. Then, in typical Xiao fashion, he's the first Adeptus to be on his way now that the danger has passed. As for the Interlude chapter, introduced in patch 2.4, Xiao's appearance here is unfortunately only optional, as is a handful of other 5-star characters, sadly. But anyway, we spot him in the wilderness nearby as we're searching for some rare materials for the Jade Chamber's reconstruction. He's quite surprised that we haven't heard at all yet about the dangers stirring in the sea right outside Guyun Stone Forest. He knows that he's technically not supposed to be involved in Liyue's affairs anymore, ever since the conclusion of Act 1 of Liyue's Archon quest and all. However, if things do get out of control, Xiao makes it clear that he has no qualms with stepping in and defending Liyue himself. Now moving on to Xiao's specific character quest, Act 1 begins when we come across a masked man who is apparently exorcising demons in front of a sizable amount of followers. This man claims to be an adeptus actually, one by the name of Star Snatcher, who then proceeds to ask Traveler what wish they'd like to be granted most. This raises a few red flags since the Adepti we've encountered normally want nothing to do with the mortal realm. Conversing with his followers only adds to the sinking feeling that all of this is just a massive cult scam, one that solely benefits Star Snatcher himself at the expense of his followers. Now, fast forwarding a couple days, we find Xiao making quick work of some demonic-touched hilichurls in the area. The Yaksha is uncharacteristically apologetic, since he seems to think the recent increase in such vicious monsters around here is due to his karma tainting everything. Though Traveler comes to realize that it's Star Snatcher's improper use of the Sigil of Permission that's actually causing all of this. But before we can mention this guy more, Xiao prioritizes exterminating the nearby cavern of these mobs before things can get worse. So because of our insistence, the loner begrudgingly accepts our help, though gameplay-wise, Xiao is still the only character we're able to use in this entire domain, while also staying in his burst form for the entire time as well. So as far as I can recall, Xiao's character quest is the only one where something like this happens, and it does make sense to me, since most of the conversation in this domain revolves around the fact that Xiao only dons his Yaksha mask when he's purging evil. Meanwhile, this Star Snatcher is never seen without the mask, no matter what he's doing. Anyway, Xiao with his millennia-long existence has never heard the name before, and agrees that this fraud scheme should be brought to an end. So he suggests his unique adeptal ability called Dream Trawler. Normally it's used to separate the soul from the body, but it can also be used just to temporarily call forth a person's spirit. Xiao needs specific items for this ritual, including many ceremonial items, which we can find near Mount Tianhong apparently, a region that features many stone statues that have been built to honor the Yakshas. On our quest to find these items, we meet this most interesting fellow who has already set up a ton of ceremonial things outside this rundown old shrine. We assure him that we only need to borrow these items, then we'll bring them straight back. So once we've gathered them all up, it's revealed that the man we were talking to was actually the already deceased Yaksha Pervases. He's honestly surprised that we came back to say goodbye, since he thought we would have just been on our way after taking what we needed. He's no longer able to sustain his physical form since we took the ceremonial items he was using for his adeptal art, though he can sense Xiao's aura on us and can tell we're helping him prepare for the Dream Trawler ceremony. Tragically, Pervases still feels ashamed that he was slain in battle. Meanwhile, the Conqueror of Demons continues to endure the karmic debt and presses on in defending Liyue. He asks us to give his regards to Xiao, then before he fades completely, mentions something about how nice it could have been to taste grilled tigerfish just once more. Also, fun fact, tigerfish used to be known as tigerfish long ago in Teyvat. Xiao is more than impressed with the quality of the ceremonial items we've managed to find, which of course leads to the topic of Pervases. Xiao's demeanor softens at this, and he only hopes that seeing Liyue in its current state has allowed his fellow Yaksha to pass on in peace. But with that said, we begin the very important, but also very complicated Dream Trawler ritual. Then, long story short, it turns out that ever since he was a kid, Star Snatcher has just been a huge admirer of the Adepti, the Yaksha in particular. So he's absolutely awestruck when he finally realizes that the figure before him is the very Conqueror of Demons himself. But he knows that he strayed from the proper path, and surprisingly, without being told, swears an oath to Xiao that he'll turn away from his crooked deeds and begin an honest life, even promising to pay back all those he has scammed. Then before his spirit fades back to his physical body, he genuinely thanks Xiao for everything he's done for Liyue. In the morning, Vergilde passes on some items that Star Snatcher, his real name being Wang Pingan, left behind. His note details how he's already set out to fully atone for his sins, since only then can he possibly be counted among the true followers of the Adepti once more. Good news that he's left his sigil of permission with the note, so we hand that over to Xiao, who uncharacteristically orders something that's not almond tofu for once. Instead, he's ordered grilled tickerfish, which was Pervases' favorite, so we can see that he's clearly in a reminiscing mood. And so, Xiao's story quest ends quietly just like that, as we leave the vigilant Yaksha to his memories. Now, Xiao is also in one other character's story quest, that being Ganyu's. She has returned to Jueyun Karst post-Osial incident, since she believes that her half-adeptal blood is enough to warrant her distance from the mortal realm as well. Part of returning to the abode of the Adepti means she has resumed her martial training under Xiao's guidance, believing only his trials will truly be able to unlock her potential. Unsurprisingly, the Yaksha is very curt and obviously isn't here to make friends, though his advice about the mind and body being connected really resonates with her. So poor Ganyu tries to report back to him once she's completed his trial, but his response is just the typical aloof showcase of the vigilant Yaksha. Furthermore, he believes only she can truly evaluate her own results, though this discussion is interrupted when Xiao notices a mortal approaching them, and leaves it solely up to Ganyu to deal with the man. Now, moving on to Xiao's appearances in patch-specific event quests, let's begin with 1.3's Lantern Rite festivities. Ever since the end of the Archon War, this annual celebration has been Liyue's way of honoring all those who have sacrificed their lives to protect the land of contracts. Though each year, Xiao avoids the celebrations entirely, wanting nothing to do with this silly event for mortals, one that he describes as just us batty humans throwing our glowing trash into the sea. Though he's definitely not called the Vigilant Yaksha for nothing, since Traveler finds him investigating a suspicious mark down at the docks of Liyue Harbor. But judging from what he's found, he can't get involved since the culprits are mortals, and he only kills demons, so he leaves everything in our hands. Fast forwarding through our investigations, we eventually discover that it was just a group of treasure hoarders who were hoping to make a quick buck off of stealing the Mingxiao Lantern's huge chunk of plasterite. Now, Xiao is pleased to hear that the suspicious threat has been resolved, but since he still refuses to join any and all festivities down in Liyue Harbor, the innkeeper couple and the traveler decide on bringing the festival straight to him instead. This involves preparing a table in a more secluded area, decorating a makeshift stall with some Xiao lanterns, and finally preparing a feast of almond tofu and grilled tigerfish. We managed to convince him to check out the surprise mini-festival we've prepared just for him, and though he still can't grasp why this is all so important to mortals, he decides to humor us and sits down for the meal. We're even able to convince him to head down to Liyue Harbor with us afterwards, though he's adamant about going only as far as the outskirts. Before we part ways just outside the city, Xiao's a bit more upfront about his real reasons for detesting the festival so much. It's just way too joyful, with such carefree and jubilant attitudes as far as the eye can see in those massive crowds. Such jubilance is nothing like him, considering all he's ever done is bring death. One of Xiao's character stories actually explains this in more detail, but I think its contents will fit better in the final section of this video, so stay tuned. But lastly, he makes quite the sentimental promise with the traveler that if they were ever to find themselves in trouble, they only need to speak his name. Then the event concludes with the release of the Mingxiao Lantern, or aka the huge one that's always based on one of the Adepti who have made the ultimate sacrifice for Liyue. Xiao is seen watching from just outside the city, and judging by his reaction, it's nice to know that even someone as aloof as him was still clearly moved by the beautiful sight. But going back to that promise he made at the end of 1.3's Lantern Rite, he actually makes good on it during patch 2.1's event. So basically, we're accompanying Xianling as she seeks out some critique and feedback on the dishes she plans to submit to the Moonchase Festival's cooking competition. She's already heard from Beidou and Xinyan, both of whom have bold tastes when it comes to flavor, so we suggest Xiao as a contrast, considering his milder preferences. And guess what? He really does appear out of nowhere when the traveler calls out his name. Upon sampling Xianling's dishes, he's genuinely impressed with her skill and can tell that she really is a master of her craft, much like a certain other chef he knows, aka Smiley. Meanwhile, Xianling is just amazed that an Adeptus really likes her cooking. Now, the only critique he can think to make is that the side dishes are a bit too strong for his taste. Then once he leaves, thankfully for him, the traveler doesn't take Paimon up on testing out how much of a cooldown the speaking Xiao's name skill has. Now to wrap up these in-game quests, Xiao is very briefly seen in a chain first added in patch 2.4. We catch him hanging around Pervases' old rundown temple, when suddenly we hear nearby cries for help. We rescue the man who actually turns out to be Wang Ping'an, aka formerly known as Star Snatcher. The reason he's in the area is that he's seeking to restore Pervases' temple, but as per the norm, Xiao makes a quick exit with barely a word of goodbye since the danger has already passed. And though we don't see any more of him for the remainder of the quest chain, let's just say that Wang Ping'an really has turned from his wicked ways and successfully follows through with the temple's restoration. But now we've arrived at the final section of this video, that being Xiao's thoughts on other characters and vice versa, and just miscellaneous things about him in general. So let's start off with one who legitimately changed his life all those millennia ago, Mr. Zhongli. The retired Geo Archon asks us to pass this powerful pain medication called Remedium Tertiarum, I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, onwards to Xiao to help ease his pain. We're also strictly warned not to let Paimon have any, since nothing of this mortal world can withstand the intensity of this stuff. Meanwhile, Xiao rather meekly asks what Zhongli has been doing nowadays since faking his death. And upon hearing these updates, Xiao honestly can't even begin to fathom what value he finds in stuff like antiques and flowers. Now, even though Ganyu can see how Xiao's innate personality may be playing a role into why he's such a loner, she also won't be going out of her way to establish friendlier terms, especially considering how everyone he's ever agreed to team up with in the past are long gone now. Dang it, being Xiao really is suffering. Meanwhile, the vigilant Yaksha does seem to grasp how difficult navigating her half-mortal, half-adeptal background must be, yet is baffled when Traveler points out that he'd probably be a good mentor for her. Actually, let's be real here, guys. Both Xiao and Ganyu are essentially two sides of the same coin, right? With Xiao leaning more towards suppressing any human traits, while vice versa is true for Ganyu. Hoping to do a video on this sometime in the future, by the way. But as for Beidou, she notes that 1 year after the Xiao lanterns had already been released during Lantern Rite, she saw what looked like a young boy floating around Guyun Stone Forest. Since then, she's been one to think that there really must be those who watch over Liyue, even if they remain unseen. Meanwhile, the Conqueror of Demons definitely respects Beido's strength, seeing that she was powerful enough to defeat the Leviathan Hai Shan. Now as for Hu Tao, Xiao finds her liveliness pretty irritating. Yet unlike most mortals who annoy him, he can at least appreciate her dark sense of humor. I mean, how can you not after hearing Hu Tao's voice lines? Though she herself has nothing in particular to say about Xiao, nor the Adepti at all. But speaking of Hu Tao, I think now is a good time to transition into the harrowing story of Qiqi's chance encounter with the Adepti as a group, and their role, albeit unintentionally, in her actual death before she was raised as a zombie. You see, centuries ago, Qiqi was just an ordinary herb gatherer who unfortunately lost her way one day, and accidentally wandered too far into the realm of the Adepti. She was tragically caught in the crossfire between them and their battle with the demons, but seeing how she was just an innocent child, the Adepti couldn't bear to just let her die. And so they each imparted a portion of their strength upon her in an attempt to breathe life back into her body. Qiqi did revive in the end, though the pure adeptal energy raging through her veins was too much for her mortal body to bear, and sent her into a berserk state. The only way the Adepti could end the disturbance was lock her away in amber. And now fast forwarding to present day, Qiqi still would have been trapped in that amber if it weren't for some humans who found her in the rock by chance. So technically, even though it's only implied that Xiao was involved here, with the Adepti mentioned as a group and all, the fact that really sells the theory to me is that they were specifically battling demons at the time of Qiqi's death. And as we all know by now, Xiao being a Yaksha means he would have been one of the foremost Adepti when it came to demon slaying. Plus, there's no way in my mind that they would just bring up collateral damage as a concept in his narrative without it holding more significance. So overall, I want to think that the aftermath of this Qiqi situation helps meaningfully explain why Xiao is so cautious about his contact with mortals. I mean, just think back to what he said here during his initial meeting with the Traveler. But now on another note, I find it interesting that Exorcists and the Adepti have apparently been fighting side by side together for generations at this point, yet Xiao still doesn't have much in respect for their techniques. As we saw in his story quest, the Yaksha was angered with how Star Snatcher was exorcising demons from monsters without actually defeating those very demons once they were released. It's not entirely known how Chongyun, and by extension Shenhe's, Exorcist clan does things in particular, but I think it's notable that Xiao legit has nothing to even say about our resident popsicle enthusiast. Chongyun himself, on the other hand, has the utmost respect for the Conqueror of Demons and everything he's done, but also just can't accept how disparaging he is of their exorcist techniques. Now, speaking of demons and grudges and other similar things, I can now finally explain Xiao's reasons for disliking the Lantern Rite festival in more detail. So in actuality, this festival aligns with the time of year where the old grudges of vanquished gods are most likely to erupt in a terrifyingly powerful state. So because of this, Xiao finds himself fighting demons night and day to ward such things off during this festive season. In fact, the origins of many of Liyue's festivals coincide with and commemorate the occasions where man-eating monsters were successfully fended off by the Adepti. So it's not like Xiao's against the celebrations themselves per se, but basically because of something that can be summed up as this particular feeling that stirred in his heart one year as he watched the lanterns float across the night sky. Whether that feeling was loneliness, peace, or even fear of the future. Xiao himself never quite got to the bottom of it. So as we can see, his attitude in the first in-game Lantern Rite event checks out. And by the way, this is just a side note, but since we're on the topic of patch 1.3 again, I distinctly remember how one of the biggest criticisms of it by the community was just how much emphasis was placed on all these NPC quests. And so I just find that point so oddly fitting with Xiao as a character, since the Yaksha himself has completed his own fair share of NPC quests. Like, for example, little Liyue right outside Qingce village totally developed a crush on him after he returned the doll the Hilichurl stole from her. And as for Dongshang, one of the main grocers of Liyue Harbor, the reason his store is named Second Life and is even around in the first place is because Xiao saved his life back when he was still an adventurer who was caught in a major accident in Dihua Marsh. So be honest here, did you guys know of these NPCs' relation to Xiao prior to watching this video? Anyway, the final piece of trivia I'd like to bring up is Xiao's line about the snow. Yup, the heavily memed one about how we can eat snow once it's thick enough. So while it's humorous to a degree just on its own, considering Xiao's life has been filled with adversity, it most likely reflects the real-life historical tendency of Chinese people eating snow during times of famine. So yeah, sorry to end this miscellaneous section on this depressing note. But overall, from everything we've discussed, it's pretty clear that Xiao has a lot more human emotion that's just totally repressed, understandably so, than he likes to let on. And just in general, everything can be summed up as being Xiao is suffering. Qiqi brings up a fair point that it's about time that the legendary boy Adeptus is freed from his duty, now that humans can protect themselves in Liyue's new age. But then that begs the real question, what would Xiao do if he truly were freed from his contract? Since this is the only thing he's known for thousands of years, and unlike someone like Zhongli, he's been so detached from the mortal realm for so long. So, seeing the potential of where his story could go, I'm hoping that we'll see more of Xiao very soon. Like, for sure he has to be in patch 2.4's Lantern Rite event, right? But what do you guys think? I'd love to hear any ideas and or theory crafting you might have about Xiao's future in Genshin. But oh my god, this video got so long. Though I also truly believe that Xiao is one of the most misunderstood characters in all of Genshin so far, so he deserved this one. But anyway, please like this video if you liked it and subscribe for more of this series. Any update videos I do for Xiao in the future will be linked in the pinned comment below, by the way. Finally, just letting you know, you can join our very welcoming and active Discord community at discord.gg LadyVirgilia. Plus, if you happen to like the Trails and or Persona series, I have a whole separate channel dedicated to those games, so check that out if you wish. But otherwise, thanks so much for watching, guys, and until next time, take care. See ya!